We need to officially call roll. And
Yeah, we can call roll. Not yet. Because microphones aren't on.
okay, good morning. Dr. Evans, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Dr. Bullock? Mr. Childers? Dr. Dempsey? Dr. Fleming? Ms. Janeski? Mr. McKinney? The microphone. They're not on anymore. The microphone's
Mine's on.
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
You can? Okay. Mr. McKinney? Dr. Graham? Ms. Hyatt? Dr. Houston? Mrs. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Lockus? Dr. Locklear? Miss Loftus? Was that you, Dr. Locklear? Miss Loftus? Dr. Mars here? Dr. McIntyre? Dr. Miller's here? Dr. Weddington?
Here.
Dr. Wood?
Here.
Okay. Not Dr. Locklear wasn't there. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome commission members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, and online listeners to the August 15th, 2019 meeting of the North Carolina Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission. This Standards Commission develops and recommends to the State Board of Education rules related to all aspects of educator preparation programs. My name is Patrick Miller, and I'm chairman of the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission, and I call this meeting to order. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website, www.ncpublicschools.org, on the SBE meetings link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the e-board agenda. I will now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Commission members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this commission. Does any member of the commission know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Do we have a quorum yet, Dr. Evans? Okay, commission members, we are one member away from having a quorum. So instead of approving the agenda and the minutes at this time, I think we'll skip ahead to the NCDPI updates. And hopefully when they finish the updates, someone else will have joined and we can then go back and vote on those items. So I would now ask Dr. Evans and Dr. Seiberg to provide the State Board of Education and NCDPI updates.
This month at the State Board, there were two items, and the first item was about quality educator preparation and accreditation in North Carolina, and Dr. Teresa Coogan, she presented that, who is our CAPE liaison for the state, and she let the State Board know that there is a proposal or an agreement on the table for the State Board to become partners with AAQP. And that this does not have a fee. This is totally something that AAQEP is inviting the state board to be a part of. In addition to that, she also wanted to recommend revisions and updates to TCED and evaluation policies, because right now they say CAPE specifically for national accreditation, and they do not mention a general national accreditation body. So in order for AAQEP to be part of that, part of those policies, then there needs to be some revisions, and that would come through Pepsi.
Can I make a comment? Are we still, are we moving on? Can I make a comment about accreditation before we start that? So I, along with a couple other folks, did receive some feedback from NCACTE, which is the North Carolina Association of Colleges and Teacher Educators. It's the professional association that represents all of the teacher prep programs. And NCACTE as a body is certainly in favor of national accreditation for teacher preparation. And they're also in favor of creating a partnership with AAQEP. So I'm certainly in favor of that. What I do want to make sure is that, so 599, which kind of laid out, Senate Bill 599, which laid out the sanctions requirements along with the EPP accountability provisions, although it lists CAPE particularly, it is aligned pretty closely to the CAPE accreditation standard. So, for example, right, it talks about partnerships, quality assurance systems, selectivity, and teacher performance. If we're going to make a change within the policy and make a recommendation, we have to look at the AAQEP standard, crosswalk that to the CAPE standard before we go ahead and move that, because what you could in essence have are two different sets of standards within the policy. So while I'm in favor of having an AAQEP agreement, I just want to make sure that if we're going to make policy change, that they are in fact aligned. And this only really pertains, I think, to new institutions that are coming on board and want to use the national accreditation route to be approved rather than the state process for being approved. AAQEP is fairly new in the process. We want to make sure that that those things are aligned. So that's it. Thank you.
Will we need to go back and change our policy for approval of EPPs? As I remember, there's two ways an entity wishing to be recognized as an EPP can get there. One, it's specifically CAPE accreditation, or then follow the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. So do we need to revise that language?
Right. So the point at which the board, has said that these two different entities can play ball in North Carolina, then we need to adjust policy to make sure that is
Aligned.
doable, right? Yeah.
Okay.
I think I have a question with that as well. Is that somewhere where we're going to try to remove, I know we've talked about this in the past, the word regional from the accreditation part of that?
I think that's separate. I think that's a separate
So
thing.
just take,
Residency license, because that was removed.
well, I'm just thinking about throughout anything, because there's multiple paths to accreditation,
Yeah.
right?
The other thing I just, as a, I don't know what this is, a recommendation, when we get ready to do that work, I think it might be advisable for this body to work with the NCTEAN, which is the Teacher Education, I think it's Teacher Education Assessment Network, which are the Colleges of Education Assessment and Accreditation Directors. So there's an organization that's a subset of NCACTE, and having some of those folks engaged in these conversations is going to be really important.
You need to do the crosswalk.
To help do, yeah, and to help provide give some recommendation to this body around how to do that, right? So we have an opportunity to engage accreditation and assessment directors throughout the state to help us do this work rather than us trying to do it ourselves, right? So we should be able to do that.
And the second item was legislative updates, and the first one was on Senate Bill 219 that became law as of July 1st, 2019. And Dr. Tomberlin presented during the state board. And he went over all the components of Senate Bill 219. So the first part is that someone with An IPL would have an extension for the third year of their license to complete their examination requirements, as long as they completed or they attempted the licensure exam at least once during their first year of the license. And also, there's a monitoring compliance piece that teachers with an IPL that the state board, through the Department of Public Instruction, would monitor the teachers, making sure that there's compliance with this section, which is regarding licensure examinations. And they would notify the teacher of not meeting compliance. Also, the conversion to a CPL, that the state board is not allowing anyone to convert without having, with an IPL, without having fulfilled the examination requirements. For elementary education and ECGC, those with a IPL, or an initial professional license, if they have not passed their test as of June 30th, 2019, and their license was going to expire, then they would get that, they would be granted an extension until June 30th, 2020. In addition, Dr. Tomberlin wanted to make sure that the state board was clear about the definition of the IPL in regards to this only being for the IPL, those license holders, and making sure that they know it's the 3-year non-renewable license for that teacher that has gone through a recognized EPP in the state, as well as other requirements established by the state board. This section it refers back to the previous sections that I just went over, that this isn't exacted by this act, beginning with applicants for teacher licensure on or after July 1st, 2019. And so it is not including current candidates, I believe. Yes. Or current license holders, I'm sorry. Then we go into the limited license, and this is a 3-year non-renewable license. It has to be requested by the local board of education. It is only used for employment within that school district, and it doesn't require a passing of a minimum score on a licensure exam. The two methods to receive a limited license are either through an IPL licensee or an out-of-state licensee. For the IPL, you must be issued an IPL, but you don't qualify for a CPL. The local board of education, they have to submit an affidavit.
And could you repeat that? It went.
Sorry about that. So you have to be issued. Okay. And in order to receive a limited license or to be issued a limited license, an IPL licensee cannot qualify for a CPL, and then the local board of education submits an affidavit stating 3 things, and the 3 things are currently employed by that local board, that they're an effective teacher, and they'll be encouraged to continue to pursue a CPL. And the affidavit has to be signed by both the school principal and the superintendent for that school that the teacher will be employed. For an out-of-state licensee, this person needs to be in good standing with a current teacher license from that state. The local board of education submits an affidavit that says that they seek to employ the teacher. The teacher has been employed as a licensed teacher in another state for at least 3 years, and they'll be encouraged to either pursue an IPL or a CPL. And the affidavit is only signed by the superintendent of that local school board. Dr. Tomberlin also mentioned that there would be rare occasions for this to be in play. Most of the time, out-of-state teachers will either receive an IPL or a CPL. depending on their level of experience and the testing requirements that they already fulfill. The next part of 219 talked about, for out-of-state applicants, that they need to have evidence of their teacher effectiveness, and if those individuals that do not have that type of evidence, they would only be eligible for an IPL or a limited license. So this is talking about military spouses, and that a local school board of education can request a 3-year limited license for that spouse. And something that Pepsi needs to focus on is what jurisdiction means, because does that means within a school district, or does that mean within a particular area of the state? Right. So that's something that will come to Pepsi later on. And State Board has been made aware of that. The next part, section 3, talks about pay for newly employed teachers, and that local school boards of education can determine experience credit for a first-year employee, first-year teacher. And if they happen to overpay that teacher, depending on their experience credit, that they would not have to repay those funds if the determination of experience credit is done in good faith based on the teacher's verification of prior employment and the SBE guidelines for awarding the experience credit. If this due diligence is not done, then they would be responsible, the local board of education would be responsible for repayment of the overpayment for state funds. The teacher would not be entitled of the same pay for future years once the state board determines what their experience credit is. But they will also not be, it says demoted, I believe. Yeah, demoted if the state board's determination results in reduction of salary. And then there's the lifetime license, and it moved from 50 years to 30 years or more of teaching. And what Dr. Tomerlin focused on here was where it says years of teaching, Pepsi needs to determine what that means. Does that mean 30 years of absolute teaching, or 30 years of holding a teaching license? Because there's a difference there. Because you could have 10 years as an administrator but still hold a teaching license for all 30 years. So he wants that brought to Pepsi. In addition, there's emergency rulemaking authority, and he had brought these 2 emergency rules previously to the state board. The 2 that are listed there, the initial professional license and the evidence of teacher effectiveness, those 2 went to the legislature, and they are actually out for comment at this point. And the effective date here talks about beginning with applications for teacher licensure submitted on or after the 18th day following the effective date of this act. And so right now, as of, this is for those with IPLs as of July 18th, so not current license holders prior to that. So those result in the request to the General Assembly. The first request talks about, because it only focuses on IPLs for the limited license, if all entry-level licensed teachers are able, including lateral entry and residency licensed teachers, to be able to be granted that, and also getting the extension on the licensure
Yes.
exams. Any questions?
Okay. Good. Thank you, Dr. Evans. At this time, we are privileged to have You got an update?
I have an update on 107.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Andrew, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. This is Andrew Cyberg. I want to talk to you. House Bill 107 has passed, and that has some immediate repercussions on our work in the future. I have just a couple slides I want to go through. Kim, if you could go to the next slide. Cool. So this actually requires two actions from the state board. One is that, and this one is due essentially October 1, is effectively what 107 has done is they've laid out 3 criteria for the accountability of EPPs. And the 3 measures are going to be a performance based on the standards and criteria for annual evaluation, so that would be NESIS. The second one would be EVOS, and the third criteria would be results from an educator satisfaction survey, which we've been collecting for a couple of years. So those are the 3 measures that the board needs to pass rules on what are the cut scores for whether an EPP gets sanctioned or not. Right? So that is due October 1st. If you can go to the next slide. The second portion of this is, and this is actually technically due in February, but we've been working with the subcommittee here from Pepsi on this for the past 5 or 6 months, is to develop a formulaic performance-based weighted model for the purposes of comparing the annual report card information between each educator preparation program. So a way of looking holistically from one educator preparation program to another. Like what is the best way to handle that? Okay, so they're actually 2 separate things. One is the 3 accountability measures, thumbs up, thumbs down, whether you've met this cut score. So that's the urgent thing that's on the table. And then simultaneously, can we develop this performance-based weighted model? And in the law, it actually says under section 3B, what they're saying is, can we ultimately present to the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee by February 15th, we can certainly do it earlier, on recommendations on the purposes and uses of the weighted model, and any legislative changes that may coincide with whether that model gets used and how it gets used. So I'm interpreting that as, they've set basic criteria for accountability, but they've also given room for this group to think very critically and develop a model that could potentially replace those 3, as long as a strong case is made and it's sound and solid. And so that's what the subcommittee has been working on. They've been looking at a couple of different models to date. We are days away from having those models, where we can actually look at data and talk coherently about it. So we're proposing the following timeline on the next slide to deal with the next steps. So between now and maybe a week from now, we anticipate we'll have the models from EPIC, and EPIC is the research arm of the UNC system. We actually have some preliminary models, but we're just tightening up it so that it's easier to digest. We should have that by the end of the week, and then we'd like to get that out to the subcommittee, so the subcommittee can look at that and start to think very carefully about where to set the rules associated with those accountability measures. And then we need to try and collect feedback from various stakeholders. I know I've heard from Dr. Godwin, who's the president
He's the current president of NCACTI.
That's correct. So he's the current president of NCACTI, which is the state division of the AACTE. And so he's reached out and said, hey, can we take a look at those models? I said, of course. There's some other stakeholders that we're bringing together to get feedback as well. The idea is that we would help gather the input from the field, again, on this rulemaking side of things, and then also the performance-based model, depending on whether we can get that done or not, with the idea of informing this body, the broader Pepsi organization, Dr. Evans has put together a time to meet for that sort of special meeting, which is September 3rd. And the reason for that special calling again is we have this obligation to meet this deadline in October. So we're trying to get the full commission together that will be informed by the subcommittee as well as stakeholders to make an informed decision about setting the rules associated with the accountability measures. And then the following board meeting, which would be the following week, we'll bring that to the board to. It'll be the next. Yeah, sorry, it'll be the next day, and you all will hopefully have heard all the different rationale and put our best foot forward as to where to set those cut scores to meet this October 1 deadline. At which point we'll send that over to the Joint Legislative Committee, knowing all the while that there's this idea that a performance-based weighted model, which is the preferred, if any of you are a part of this subcommittee, you'll agree with me on this notion that is the preferred way to go, is to have multiple measures and take a more holistic perspective of what the EPPs are doing, and then ultimately inform the broader the stakeholders and ultimately the joint legislative body so that they can see that this is a better way to go. Hopefully it is, and then ultimately change the legislation, which would change what they're putting in place in October. So it's a little bit confusing, but I just, again, I really apologize that we don't have a gentler timetable to deal with all this. And I talked with Cecilia and some of the stakeholders here at the department because what happens from our perspective is we get these drafts, right? And the drafts say a specific timeline in the future, but we don't know when the thing actually gets passed. So because we didn't know that because it didn't pass until July 22nd, when we were initially looking at it, it didn't look as ominous as October didn't look as ominous as it did because we didn't know they were going to pass it until way late into the end of July. So we need to do a better job of making sure that we set timelines further out so that it doesn't crimp the board and this body in their decision making. And I do apologize for that, and just know that it's a little bit challenging from our perspective because we don't know when they're going to pass votes on their side. But know that we'll work to try and make that a little bit better in the future. So what questions do you all have about 107?
So I have a mostly comment, right? So one, I just want to make it clear that no one in teacher preparation is opposed to accountability and being accountable for graduates and the work that they're doing. Based on my conversations with colleagues and my own perspective, we're vehemently opposed to any system that ranks teacher preparation programs in this state. That doesn't do anything to help any of us. And so when the PED report came out last summer, that's exactly what that report did. It ranked 1 through 51 the colleges of education in the state, and if you looked at the ranking, it's pretty hard to digest, right? These were kind of arbitrary measures. There were lots of issues with that. So I do have some real concerns about the ranking of programs. To whatever degree we can make it criterion based and right, great, right? I'm absolutely in favor. So, and I know that's not the intent, right? We're not out here to try to rank programs. I think the other piece is to whatever degree we can bring in as many stakeholders as possible, and if there's a way to invite the directors, the associate deans and directors. So when you look at the directory, right, you've got licensure officers and folks like that, because the associate deans and directors are going to be the ones who are actually tasked with implementing this on campus in most cases, right? So in my campus, it would be me, as opposed to my dean implementing this. And I want to make sure that we get the folks that are going to be tasked with the work in the room. So
definitely agree with that. And I think again, we have a little more time with the performance-based, formulaic system. I mean, I can tell you, I think from the subcommittee standpoint, the idea of saying that this institution is ranked 13th and this one is 14th is not the direction that they're headed. I think their recommendations to date have been to think more along 4 different categories. And the reason that they want to think about that is because there's a sanctions subcommittee that's thinking about these things in parallel, which is that if we had really if we can identify really outstanding, a quadrant of outstanding institutions, we can leverage their best practice to help the most challenging EPPs in meaningful ways that tie to how you sanction and in what ways do you support associated with those sanctions. So I agree with you. I think the subcommittee and the work to date is referencing that. So how do we set up something that meets and satisfies the intent of the lawmakers, but does not get them pigeonholed into this idea of this is the best institution? To compare like that is inappropriate for multiple reasons.
Okay, just a couple things here. Andrew, will we, because I know we're kind of bound by the constraints of the timeline, but will we, as a full commission, have the weighted rubric or whatever information that's going to be discussed on September 3rd? Will we be able to have that posted the week before so that we have time to get feedback from the field for our respective areas?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. And just for point of clarity, remember, we're doing 2 simultaneous things. One, the rules responsibility associated with the accountability is essentially setting cut scores and expectations on those 3 areas. That's the primary driver for all this push in the immediacy of it. Then the second is this idea of these formulaic performance models, which we are working on simultaneously with the idea of using more time than just this next week or 2 to make sure that we hear from all the different stakeholders out in the community and get a real good sense of what is our best foot forward for a better and a holistic perspective.
And we agree with that from an HR perspective because just like Michael said there, we're not opposed to having, accountability measures in place. Just want to be careful that the language that is drafted at this point does not somehow undo the things that we've already been able to achieve, such as some flexibility with who is issuing or recommending for licensure, right? So just want to make sure, because sometimes, when we do policies out of context or we don't go back and look, and not that we do that, but in a rush timeline that might happen, want to be able to just, cross-check everything.
Noted.
Mrs. Jones, I just wanted to make you aware that the subcommittee meeting is not until August 30th.
No, so it's going to be
then
tough.
It'll be a tight timeline. And then also talking to EPP representatives
Yeah.
will also happen that day.
So we still want to have a lot of input from those in the field from the HR perspective, because if we're looking at NESIS or EVOS or any other thing that may become formulaic, or anything that might go back and undo the flexibility that we now have for EPPs recommending licensure, right? Whether it's a testing issue, we just want to have a little bit of time, right?
So both of those meetings are a little earlier in the day.
Okay,
So we're hoping to get that out to everyone to
okay,
get feedback.
all right. And so I'm guessing they're going to be open meetings under the open meetings law and be
So the
public?
subcommittee meeting will be public.
Okay,
The EPP representatives will not.
okay, yeah, okay, thanks, Kim.
Any other questions about that?
Hearing none. During the presentation, we have gained a quorum, so I would like to move back in the agenda and let's approve today's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for our August 15th, 2019 meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda has been approved. Thank you. Now, if you would, the minutes from our previous commission meetings on June 13th and July 2nd have been prepared and made available to you. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from June 13th and July 2nd meetings. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes have been approved. Thank you. Next, we are privileged to have with us Dr. Olivia Oxendine from the North Carolina State Board of Education, and she is going to present school administration licensure evidences to us. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Miller, Vice Chairperson Marr, and Dr. Jones. It's a privilege, and other members of Pepsi who are listening in, as well as other components of the audience who may also be listening in, as well as our participants in the audience in the room this morning. And I have a feeling one of the members in the audience, or a couple of them, could be my students back at UNC Pembroke, who they know about this presentation, and they ask, get this is very apropos, they ask if they could use my presentation as one of their evidences. So I could not say no. But thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your busy time and your important time. And I do want to take this just a minute to say thank you to Pepsi for being a partner with the State Board of Education and informing much of the policy work that we do and the policies that we eventually approve. We certainly couldn't do it without your expertise and the knowledge and the feel for the work that you bring to Pepsi and then you provide to us, and that is brought to us through our very expert staff here in the department. So on behalf of the State Board of Education, as one member, I want to say thank you. And I also want to reassure EPP, MSA faculty members who are listening in that Olivia Oxendine is not here proposing that we have a revival of evidences, because we kind of left evidences a long time ago. I have been doing this quite a while. I am on my blank year at UNCP teaching in the MSA program. I am the program director, and I've been on the faculty for quite a while. So I remember long summer days, and I think it was 2009, going through the process called revisioning or something like that. It had an R-E in front of it. And I have 6 lines on my forehead. And I have dedicated those wrinkles to the 6 evidences because it was quite an ordeal to, and I don't want to undermine the work of standards, the thinking that went into standards and descriptors and elements, because I'm sure lots of thought went into that. But what I want to do today is talk with you really not about the renaissance of the evidences, but going forward, because I do believe there is a subcommittee studying new principal standards, and rolling out of new principal standards for principals will probably be standards for EPP MSA programs. So those companion standards will come about. And I want to just point out, let's see if I can get my... There we go. So I want to just, and not even go through the entire presentation. You have it in eBoard. I'm going to hit some highlights to save everyone time. Here are 6 evidence areas. So what I'd like to do is share with you some of the challenges the MSA faculty members have experienced, and good challenges as well, with the evidences. And as you move forward with new standards and new I suppose if you want to call the proof of mastery evidences or whatever terminology you use to do proof of mastery, some of the things that I would hope you would be mindful of based on some of the challenges we've experienced. So here are the 6 evidence areas, I'm not standards, but evidence areas. You have the positive impact on student learning and development. You have the teacher empowerment and leadership. And you also have community involvement, engagement, organizational management. We have the school culture and safety and school improvement. The way we go about the development of the evidences at UNCP is they are presented, introduced, and they're completed in courses. So before our students, one of the requirements for program completion and licensure is tied to the completion of those evidence assignments. They're very comprehensive, as you well know, and very, very involved. Okay, they're tied to the 7 standards for EPPs, I think 8 standards for principals. So here is one area. Area 1, positive impact on student learning and development, and I am having a difficult time seeing. Pardon me for just a minute. I need to get organized.
That helps too.
It's better.
Is that better?
So can you hear me? So one of the challenges that, let's say Olivia Oxendine, I don't want to pretend that my colleagues have had the same challenges, but they have had challenges. So one of the challenges that I have had with the evidences and explaining, teaching, guiding, and helping the MSA candidate complete the evidence is deciding how to design it. Should the evidence be designed around, and I'm looking at Area 1, positive impact on student learning and development, element. So my question has been, do I design around the element, or do I design the evidence assignment around the descriptor? Now, the descriptor will give a richer, I have found the descriptor will give a richer evidence and a better experience, learning experience for the student. But at a certain point in the design of the evidence, it's almost like I'm forced to, for instance, descriptor A1 works with others to focus on the alignment of learning, teaching, curriculum, instruction, and assessment to maximize student learning. Okay, good. So I have a great idea for an evidence. Oh, and I know exactly where in the evidence I can require the student to do something to prove mastery or understanding. Then I get to the second descriptor, and the second descriptor is 2A, helps organize targeted opportunities for teachers to learn how to teach their subjects well with engaging lessons. And then I move on to 3, the one beneath, utilizes multiple resources of data, including the Teacher Working Condition Survey for the improvement of instruction. And so what happens is the evidence loses focus because the descriptors are arranged in such a way that they lack cohesion. Therefore, the evidence is piecemealed. The end product becomes piecemealed. So what I have determined, now I teach two evidences. I'm working on the third one. I mean, we have all the evidence. It's pretty much designed. But I'm beginning to teach the third one. And what I have found is that I almost have to come up with require the students to do a survey teachers based on questions aligned to the descriptors in order to achieve cohesion. And then from the responses that the students receive from the teacher or surveys or parent surveys, then move forward with the completion of the evidence. So I guess what I'm saying is, as we rethink, as we go back to the table, the drawing board, we think standards for principals and companion standards for EPP, MSA programs, that we think very carefully around, if we're going to require evidences or something called evidences, like similar to evidences, that we give very, very good consideration, thorough discussion and consideration into what we want the end product to be. Otherwise, we're back on this trail of piecemeal products. So that is kind of the gist of my presentation today. I do want to highlight a couple of other. I'm not going to go through the Area 5. School culture and safety is a very important. Each area is very important. I don't mean to rank them by any means. But the same applies to Area 5 in terms of needing cohesion across whether it's the elements that will be the framework for designing the product or the descriptor. Even if going forward, if we have exemplars of products, if we have handbooks to develop the products. Now, what we've done at UNCP, we have created and we've developed guidebooks and handbooks that will help the students. It's not a recipe book, but guidance on how to develop the evidences. So we have found that to be very helpful. So the committee working on standards for practicing administrators and EPP MSA candidates, please consider exemplars, consider handbooks, consider examples, but really give a lot of thought to whatever comes together to lead to this end product. That cohesion is the kind of the word, the term that you want to underscore. And if I can skip on down, I'm sorry. I hope you're able to follow me. If you go to this, is it not? Sorry, okay. So, still under school culture and safety, you see a table. And the table, this is the way the template kind of looks from DPI, that DPI provided back in 2009. And this is the template where the student is required to capture and prove and to align components of the evidence with these elements and descriptors. And so what we do, the MSA faculty, we just, at the completion of the evidence, go inside that evidence and prove that this component of the assignment aligns with the descriptor or the element. That this gives you kind of a look at the way we assure alignment through this particular template. So what I would say is that I'm down to recommendations. What I would say is that if we were going to continue in the world of evidences as we began in 2009, a long time ago, I would say that there are descriptors in organizational management, for instance, that belong in the teacher empowerment and leadership bucket. And those two descriptors are there for you. Descriptor 4C1 and descriptor 4C2 seem to feel more like teacher empowerment and leadership versus organizational management. However, this is probably going to be history, but if we were still moving forward with evidences, I would also recommend that in the organizational management that we would take descriptor 6A2, or 3 rather, place it in the bucket for positive impact on student learning and external leadership. I am now still on recommendation, continued teacher empowerment and leadership. If we were moving forward with evidences as we learned about them in 2009 and know them today, I would recommend that element 3A focus on collaborative work, and the two descriptors 3A1, 3A3 go into school culture and safety. They seem to they feel more like that particular bucket. And going on to the next slide of recommendations, if we were continuing forward, and we are not doing that, but just for the sake of making my point, teacher empowerment and teacher leadership, if you look at, I'm not making a recommendation, but I'm drawing attention to the word under descriptor 4A2. Do you see the word routinely? It is underscored. And I point out that descriptor because it's really hard to capture routinely in an evidence, folks. It's just really hard. So any of the like adverbs and adjectives that we just need to be very careful with the wording around standards and descriptors if we intend for these standards and descriptors, or whatever we choose to call them in the future, are intended to lead towards some product of mastery. Okay? And I think that concludes my presentation. One other suggestion. I would recommend that we have a standard around something like law literacy. We have a course, and I'm sure each EPP has a MSA program has something around school law. It may not be titled school law, but it exposes the candidates to school law, local policies, federal policies, and that community of information, knowledge, and skills. But we just really need something. I would recommend something in the area of being knowledgeable, but not just about state law, but federal law as well, law literacy. And micro-political, we continue to scratch our heads at UNCP over that one. I don't know about the other EPPs or MSA programs around the state, but last night at the internship orientation class, MSA internship orientation class, Introduction to the seven standards, we talked long and hard, about 30 minutes on, Dr. Oxenine, what does that really mean? And so I gave them about 5 different interpretations from, you need to know it, for sure. But that, it only has one descriptor, I believe, so if it, only constitutes a need for one descriptor, where else could we place in the new standards micro-political? Important. I'm not saying to eliminate it. It just needs a better fit, and it probably needs a more clear definition of what we mean. You have micro-politics within a school setting. Your school improvement team, your PLCs, that's a smaller unit of decision-making, but you also have micro-politics in the external world, such as your school board, your county commissioners, your city councils, and other bodies that are charged with governance. So just, I would propose that the committee, the subcommittee, the working committee give serious consideration to clearly defining, through examples, exemplars, guidance documents, what this particular product should look like. So with that said, I'll take your questions, your comments. Now I know how it feels to be at the mic.
Are there questions for Dr. Oxendine?
I think just comments, and then I would say that generally, the folks in the field would support more clarification, obviously, around this. Sometimes even our current ones, right, are so broad and open to interpretation. So I think the more this can be nailed down, you do want it to be a little bit broad because, what's happening over here as opposed to here. But it does need to have a little more clarity because, as you said, the micro-political one becomes one that we struggle with a little bit. But also just to share that, I think it's standard 5, but don't hold me to that because my brain's not functioning. I had a lot of teachers this week that I've been working with. But that does capture the federal and state mandates with regard. But I understand what you're saying around the school law component. But there's an evidence.
Another way to get that.
It's in there. So I do think with even the sometimes the concerns we have about it being too broad or not specific enough, the training we have had on this instrument in the state, going clear back to some of the people that are no longer at DPI has been phenomenal. And with that, what we've had some groups do is come up with some exemplars.
That's very good.
And I don't know that that's ever been published everywhere, right? Because we have the turnover with people. And so the more we can get exemplars to go with this.
I think that would be great. Mm-hmm.
Sorry?
That's a recommendation from the Pembroke faculty.
Yeah, the more we can get exemplars to go with it, just not that they're all inclusive, but here's some examples you can look at. Because I know there was a private consultant group that had retired HR folks in it that came up with some a number of years ago, and they drilled that down not just to the principal instrument, but HR. What does this look like for you? But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Oxendine. Now Dr. Evans will discuss policy TCED-016, teacher evaluation tool, for discussion, and then she will review the Pepsi annual report for 2018-19. Both items will receive action today. Dr. Evans.
Good morning again. I'm going to go through all of the revisions for TCED 016 for the Beginning Teacher Support Program policy. And the first couple revisions are just general revisions. There was feedback from the field that there needed to be links to the handbook for the Beginning Teacher Handbook throughout the policy to make it easily available for anyone that's looking at the policy. And so those marked in red or blue, depending on how the link came out. And then also to move the mentor standards at the bottom of the policy, to the bottom of the policy. So those are two very general revisions. One of the revisions is also under BTSP requirements. It's at the very bottom to add these two sentences to include charter schools, public schools with charter-like flexibility, and private schools, that if they choose to support North Carolina licensure for their teachers, that they adhere to all these licensure requirements regardless of the flexibility that they are able to have through state policy or state statute.
So are we ready for comments there, or do you want me to wait?
You can make a comment, go ahead.
Okay, so, we have a lot of concern about the language here, that it could eliminate some of the restart flexibility that we have right now, because not every teacher in a restart school pursues licensure. Now, some LEAs, yes, we're gonna get you a license, right, if we can possibly do that, but the whole purpose behind that particular legislation was to give us the charter school-like flexibility, so.
So to clarify, what we're saying here is not that you have to do this for teachers that are opting not to be licensed, then you're not going to provide this type of support. But if you have a teacher that has an IPL and you're supporting that teacher, then you need to do this.
Just that we need to
Or
really make
residency
that clear,
license.
because we agree with you on that,
Right.
right?
So that could be clarity from Dr. Tomberlin when he sends this out.
Yes.
And also during his webinar, his monthly webinar. Any other comments?
Yeah, because I just really want to be clear on that, Kim, because thank you for that. But even the flexibility that we drill down to in those restart schools, we have restart schools that are not using, now I don't, but there's some in the field that have restart schools not even using NESAs, because part of the flexibility that goes with restart is they can opt to do a different evaluation instrument. So we just need to kind of have that kind of clarity so that no one reads into this and a little bit later comes back and says, oh my goodness, this really meant, and no, you can't be doing this now, so now we need to revisit it again.
Right. It's for those that you choose to support.
That have a
licensure.
license, and we're going to put
Yes,
them through the
yes.
beginning teacher
That
support
they need
plan.
to have that
and-
beginning teacher support program.
Okay.
The next piece is making sure that we just added the correct SBE policies. It said the policy manual, and we made it specific policies 001 and 003 in there for the BTSP plan process. And then also we made sure it was the correct general statute in there. For implementing the BT induction process, before it said the optional working conditions, whereas they are actually required working conditions guidelines, and below that, it actually said required, so it contradicted itself within the policy, so optional was taken out. And then for the mentor assignment requirements, charters were added in there that they would select excellent, experienced, and qualified teachers to serve as mentors, to include them. And then also under mentor assignment requirements, that it includes public and non-public school units, that again support teachers in pursuit of NC teacher licensure, that they would be monitored for compliance with this policy by DPI. It's just an inclusion piece in there. And this is also inclusionary for non-public school units. So the ones that were listed before, charter schools, the private schools, problems with charter-like flexibility, making sure that they're all included in this piece, plan for participation in the BTSP peer review process. And then the last piece is a technical change, and this does not need approval. I'm just making everyone aware of this. For the teacher evaluation tool, right now it says specifically NESAs, which is used by the LEAs, the public schools, and the charter schools need to have some flexibility. They need to be able to use a tool as long as it is properly validated and includes standards and criteria similar to those in the North Carolina Professional Teaching Standards and North Carolina Teacher Evaluation Process. They would be allowed to use another tool. In addition, something that is not in the PowerPoint, I wanted to make the field aware. There has been a question from the field about clarity on who, if an instructional facilitator is allowed to be a mentor, and we are looking for seeking clarity on that, and that is something that I will let everyone know at the next Pepsi meeting. Any questions?
So I'm looking at the ETSB handbook. Is that going to be updated? It's got a 2018 date. I'm looking at the policies that are listed in here, and they're not current. So, for example, there are.
Are you looking at the one, Michael, that's has all the links to
I'm
it?
on the one that's linked, and
Oh.
it talks about NTE praxis exams. It talks about a
I will relay that
2.5.
message to the proper people.
Yeah, so it's got old. It has a lot of old policy in here that is not in line with what we have approved recently, and some of it seems pretty out of date.
I will make sure they get that message.
Thanks.
Other questions or concerns? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the revised policy changes to TCED-016 to be sent to the NC State Board of Education in September?
So moved.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the policy changes to TCED-016. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? And the policy changes have been approved. Thank you. Now, Dr. Evans will talk to us about the Pepsi annual report for 2018-19.
So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the report and give some highlights. So as we know, Senate Bill 599 requires an annual report, and it needs to be submitted by December 1st of that particular year to the State Board and also the Joint Legislative Education Oversight Committee. The report term for this annual report is September 1st, 2018 to September 1st, 2019. And it consists of an introduction, committee membership and structure, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction personnel, meetings with a policy guide and a summary of the meetings, and then future subcommittee work. And for commission membership, there was a request for the membership to be staggered so that we don't lose what we have in structure presently. And so Senate Bill 686 became session law 2019-122 on July 16th to stagger that membership. Approval of Senate Bill 334, it was formerly House Bill 200, on July 26, 2019, made the membership official. And so commission membership for members with term ending August 31st, 2020 include Patrick Miller, Megan Loftus, Van Dempsey, Hank Weddington, Lauren Janeski, Wesley Wood, Connie Locklear, Samuel Houston. And members with term ending August 31st, 2021, Anthony Graham, Glenda Jones, Michael Marr, Aaron Fleming, Ellen McIntyre, Ann Bullock, and just as a side note, Andrew Lockus, he remains the NC State Superintendent appointment until further notice. And then members leaving Pepsi as of August 31st, 2019, Freeburg McKinney, the 2018 State Teacher of the Year, Robin Hyatt, Teaching and Learning Coach, Johnson County Schools, Joseph Childers, Principal for Winston-Salem Public Schools. And the new members are Mariah Morris, 2019 State Teacher of the Year, and Michael D. Hicks, marketing and personal finance teacher of Union County. And they will start on September 1st, 2019. There's also one more member that we don't know who it will be because to replace Ms. Hyatt. The commission meetings and overview, there were 24 total meetings, 11 were subcommittee meetings, and during those subcommittee meetings, we did a lot of work on the accountability and sanction models for EPPs, which started in December 2018. We did a lot of work on LICN 001 for out-of-state teacher licenses, and LICN 003 math content exam for elementary education and ECGC. And there were also 12 monthly meetings. And then future subcommittee work for the licensure subcommittee includes revising professional licensing, international faculty license, educator preparation subcommittee, revision of the NC standards for school executives, which is happening currently, sanctions model for EPPs, revising the 2008 NC standard course of studies, program approval revisions, and revisiting national accrediting body, which we previously talked about. And for the assessment and performance subcommittee, accountability model for EPPs, EPP reporting, and evaluation standards for educators. Are there any questions or comments?
It's nice to look back and realize that we've actually accomplished a few things. So do we have a motion to approve the Pepsi annual report for 2018-19? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Glenda. We have a motion and a second to approve Pepsi's annual report for 2018-19. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And the report has been approved. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Evans. On behalf of Pepsi's membership, I also would like to recognize those members whose terms end on August 31 and thank them for their service to Pepsi. Those are Mr. Freebird McKinney, Ms. Robin Hyatt, and Mr. Joseph Childers. Thank you all for your dedication and your hard work during your terms on Pepsi. I'd also like to welcome our new members, Mrs. Mariah Marsh, the 2019 North Carolina Teacher of the Year. She's sitting here with us. Welcome, Mariah. And Mr. Michael Hicks from Union County. He is on the telephone. Welcome to you, Mr. Hicks. So Ms. Marsh and Mr. Hicks are the newest members of Pepsi, and Kim Evans will be in touch to give you your orientation to Pepsi if she hasn't already. So thank you for agreeing to serve Mariah and Michael. So thank you, commission members, advisors, and staff for your preparation for today's discussions. I remind commission members that our next meeting is a conference call meeting, and it will be held in this room on Tuesday, September 3rd from 10:30 to 11:30, or you can call in. We have now completed our meeting, and unless there is additional business at this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Glenda. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
We don't take that issue. Not to end the meeting.